Good morning, my friends. I'm Pastor Ben Hayes from First Baptist Church, Dadeville, Alabama, bringing you our thought of the day on a terrific Tuesday. What a beautiful morning it was. Nice out on the porch drinking coffee. I'm telling you, it was nice. And I think we've got some good weather coming in about a week, so hang in there. Right now, we're in Hebrews chapter 8. We're going to pick up in verse 13, where we left off yesterday, and move into chapter 9. Keep in mind that chapter and verses were added later. All of this was just one big long letter that I believe the Apostle Paul wrote. And so men, to help us find our places where we wanted to be, divided it up into chapters and verses. And so there really is no stop there in between at chapter 8 and 9. In fact, they go together. Look at what he says in verse 13. In that he says, who we're talking about? We're talking about the Father. The Father is telling us what we need. He says, a new covenant. Now, understand, the new covenant is the fact that Jesus died on the cross of Calvary for our sins, was buried and rose again, and all who believe in him will not perish but have everlasting life. It's a covenant of grace rather than a covenant of law. He says he has made the first obsolete. When God started talking about a new covenant back in the Old Testament even, remember he said in Jeremiah, I'm going to write a new covenant on the fleshly tablets of your heart. When he started talking about that, the only reason you need a new covenant is if the old covenant is going away. And it is. The old covenant, he says, is obsolete. Now, what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. The old covenant, the sacrificial system, the Levitical laws, all of those things are going away because of Jesus, because of what he did. Now, what he's going to do now is he's going to go into detail about the old covenant. So let's look at this, and you need to have some good Old Testament background to understand what he's talking about here. But look at what he says. Then indeed, even the first covenant had ordinances of divine service and the earthly sanctuary. God had a plan. God had a purpose. One of the things we're studying in Romans right now with our firefighters in chapter 7 is that what the law was meant to do was never to bring salvation. The sacrificial system, it wasn't about salvation. It was about understanding that there was coming a better way, the new covenant in Jesus' blood. Because the law was there to energize our sinful passions. That's what he tells us in Romans chapter 7. The law was there so that we could see how sinful we were. See, without the law, you don't know that you're sinning. Without God saying, don't do this, we don't know that we're not supposed to do it. Now, we know basic right and wrong. Cain knew he was wrong to kill his brother Abel, and there was no law then. He knew that because we're born with this innate sense of right and wrong, this moral conscience that is there. But to know that we're breaking the law of God, that we're sinning, that we're in rebellion against God, there has to be a law given. So the law was there to show us the way. But here's what Paul says in Romans 7. What the law served to do was to place a challenge in front of us. That's the way we see it, isn't it? Somebody puts a new stop sign up in our neighborhood and say, we don't need a stop sign there, so we don't stop. We see the speed limit sign, we say, you know what, I can go just a little bit beyond that. There's a rebellious spirit within us. And it seems as if as soon as the law is given, there are those of us who rebel against the lawgiver. All right. So the ordinances were there. Ordinances of divine service, talking about what the priests were required to do. And the earthly sanctuary, the tabernacle that God shared with Moses to build and create a place of worship. Now, that's what we're talking about here. For a tabernacle was prepared. Tabernacle means a tent. It's a temporary dwelling. It was one that they could pick up and move as they wandered through the wilderness. A tabernacle was prepared. The first part, in which was the lampstand, the table, the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And this is the place where the priest would go and minister. And behind the second veil, the part of the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could go, and that only one time a year to make atonement for sin. And the Holy of Holies, which had the golden censer and the Ark of the Covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that had the manna, Aaron's rod and the bud that budded, the tablets of the covenant, and above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. Paul says, I've got other fish to fry. I can't stop here and talk about this. Can you imagine the beauty of that place and the special nature of that place and the presence of God in that place? Now, they believed that God sat enthroned on the Ark of the Covenant all year round. Truth is, God is everywhere, right? But there was something special about that because it was the place where they were called to go to, the high priest was called to go to meet with God that one day of year, to make atonement for the sins of the people, pointing to the blood that would be shed on the cross of Calvary. We'll pick up here tomorrow, talk a little bit more about this. But right now, be blessed. I'll see you back here then.